On this week's episode, it's another edition of All Things Property, and I'm joined by David Patricio, Chairman of the Leisure Launch Group, where we talk about the challenges of building a home in Portugal. For those of you listening, head over to our YouTube channel to watch this episode, and for those of you watching, click down below and subscribe. And now over to my conversation with David. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal the Simple Life. And I'm joined once again by an old favorite, David Patricio. David, thank you for being on the podcast again. How are you?
I'm great. I'm always good. I'm home where I'm where I should be.
Exactly.
In Portugal, it's amazing. I'm good.
Exactly. Well, we're doing another edition of All Things Property. We're not going to talk about football. We're not going to talk about ceramics. We're not going to talk about politics. We're not going to talk about cork, but we do every now and then have to talk about food. And I know it's your favorite subject.
Yes, it is.
So just a little bit of because we know who you are. You've been on the podcast many times. And for people listening, go back and listen to other episodes with David. But tell us about the last amazing Portuguese meal that you had.
I must tell you, the most recent one it's got a really special place in my heart. I was in Madeira for the New Year. It's something that I know that you've done it a couple of times. It's something that you need to do at least once in your life, just to watch the fireworks. My wife and I, we went along and we did it this year. We had no grandchildren at home with us, so we decided, well, let's go and do New Year in Madeira. We had something that I hadn't had in a while, espetada. I don't know if your guests are familiar with it. Espetada is where the Madeirans they've done espetada. It's a huge kebab, not a tiny little one that you get in most countries. It's a huge kebab done on a bay leaf skewer, but it's
a stick. It's a whole branch.
It's a whole branch. They bay leaf trees grow quite abundantly in Madeira, and families will look after these trees so they grow these really long sticks, which they use then as to put the meat on. So they cut these chunks of meat, probably be about an inch and a half, nice and thick. They put it on they obviously clean the branch nice, give it a nice sharp end, wipe it down, and then they put this meat on, and then they sprinkle some coarse salt. All that it takes, again, coarse salt and garlic, and they put it on a nice hot fire, proper wood fire or charcoal fire. And the flavor is something out of this world. The Madeirans have taken such a simple dish. Again, it's a peasant dish, but they've taken it to another level. The salt and the garlic penetrate the meat just on the outside, just enough. Halfway through the grill, they bang it a bit so that the salt can fall off. But more importantly, what really makes it really special is that the meat draws flavor from the bay leaf. It is something out of this world, something that I'd long forgotten. And then what they do is they have this cute thing, they hang it up, and then they put some butter in a serviette and put the butter on, and the heat just melts the butter, and they just, amazing.
Okay, we could talk about food for a long time, so I'm gonna have to call it. I'm gonna have to just stop us there, otherwise we're never gonna stop. Remember the first episode that we did together? I think most of the episode we spoke about food. So yeah, we just need to put a pin in it. Maybe next time we'll talk about something else to do with food.
Exactly.
You're the chairman of the Leisure Launch Group, which is a big property group here on the Silver Coast. Hundreds and hundreds of houses built. And the thing that I wanted us to talk about today was the challenges of building a property, building a home. This is something that people avoid doing in their own country. What are some of the challenges? Why do people avoid building homes? And what are some of the challenges involved? Just take us through some of those things.
Yeah, this is where we get on to my next favorite subject, property. Absolutely addicted to property. But yeah, building in any country in the world, especially, well, to begin with, in your own country, what I always say to people, in your own backyard is always a challenge. There are so many variables in construction. It's not always the fault of the contractor. Again, not always the fault of the architect, not always the fault of the engineer. The problem with construction is that there are so many variables that all the parties involved in it can't control. They can try over the years. They've got better at it, depending on the location where you're building. Obviously, local engineers, local architects are obviously familiar with the conditions that they have. So obviously, they try and reduce the risk as much as you possibly can. But anybody that has been through the exercise of building their own home, especially refurbishments, which is, I always say to people, if you're going to do a refurbishment, it's really much easier just to go and shoot yourself in the foot,
Yeah, there's a very short episode for refurbishment. Just don't.
It's just crazy. I wouldn't do it myself, and I would consider myself one of the more experienced people in Portugal in certainly in property and the building of property. But it's not something that I would take on myself as well. The challenges that you have always with construction, it is probably the most difficult job that you can do. Hence the reason why so few people want to get into it. The labor, there's a lot of manual labor that is involved, parts of stuff that people don't like to do. People generally who do manual labor are, to be polite, less educated, good people, honest people, all these kind of things. But where people start to suffer, most architects are not qualified to give people quotes. They will give people a budget for the building of their house. They never come in budget. It's actually quite rare that I'll find an architect who will be able to produce a house within budget. And then closer to the end of the construction, he'll start telling you that, okay, actually, I'm an architect. That's not really my area. Pretty didn't begin with that at the beginning of the conversation. Then you have an engineer, which also limited, far better qualified for that job. And in most Anglo-Saxon countries, you also have quantity surveyors, which are engineers, which are specifically trained for this purpose. Again, much better, but they will always say to you, listen, here's the budget, but give or take so many percent depending on the country that you're in. So 10% seems to be what people normally throw around. The most reliable is the contractor, actually. If you're working with a reputable builder, a reputable company that stands by their good name, they will do a key-in-hand project. There's not a lot of them that will do this, but those that do it will mean that you would limit your exposure. In any country in the world, I strongly recommend that people try and find contractors. There are times in the building cycle when contractors are less inclined to do this, principally the last year or so, where we've had wars and crisis and inflation and all these kind of things. But these are things that are out of their control.
Yeah.
But if you can find a contractor that is reputable, that comes highly recommended, and you can do a key-in-hand project, then that would be the route that I would take. Okay. Yeah.
We'll come on to solutions, because I want to dig into, what people can do to make this an enjoyable experience. But just, you've touched on some of them, but maybe we can just list some of those variables that people aren't really aware of when building a home. You mentioned labor. You mentioned the raw material costs. There's a whole bunch of factors that people don't think about when speaking to somebody about building their home. Labor
is a big issue. With refurbishment, it's very common that contractors will charge you by the hour, because the problem with refurbishments is that they don't know how much labor. They can guess, but the reality is they don't know how much labor they're going to require. When they start to break walls, they don't know what they're going to find, what the previous contractor who built the house 100 years ago hid away in the walls. So that they normally do by the hour. Normal construction, obviously, that's a lot more. New construction, let's just say that's a lot more controlled. So the risk is less. Raw materials, again, another challenge, like I spoke about earlier, in terms of the period that we have been going through for the last 2 years, and probably will go on for the next year or so, at least, until the market stabilizes. Weather, a real problem. Weather is a huge problem, depending on the country that you're building in. There are some countries that contractors will only work for the summer months of the year, so probably at most, they will build or work for 9 months of the year. There are other countries where they're better prepared. It also depends on the kind of materials that they're using for construction. You find in many countries they build with wood and etc. In Portugal, we tend to build houses and buildings designed to last a lifetime. So we build with a lot of brick and mortar, concrete, these kind of things.
But one of the questions that always comes up from my clients is, why does it take so long to build a house? Well, it's brick and concrete.
It's concrete.
What's it going to stand for a long time?
Things have got to set. The concrete's got to set. The cement. You have factors like the weather. If you're lucky and your house gets built in the summer, or certainly in Portugal, where we have a much longer sunny period, so at least for about 8 or 9 months of the year we can build quite comfortably. The winter becomes a challenge. Obviously, we don't. This year we've had exceptional amount of rain, breaking all kinds of records since they started keeping records. Interestingly enough, we went from a couple of years ago where we were looking at water shortages, the possibility of controlling how much water we use in our homes, things like this, to now our barrages or our dams are all very, very full. So in construction, it translates to muddy ground, lots of mud, challenges like painting. You need to paint your house on the outside. You cannot paint it. Plastering, again, if you need to plaster a wall and the wall is damp, you can't plaster. These kind of challenges, these are things which are completely out of the contractor's control. How do contractors or good reputable builders get around this problem? Is they try and be efficient as they possibly can in time, so that should these things occur, that they will always be affected, but they can reduce that. What else? The biggest problem, I would say, is clients changes. Oh my God. Every contractor in the world avoids changes. Small alterations that clients request. Oh, I thought maybe if we put the window on the left, why don't we raise this wall, drop this wall, put it up, take it down? These kind of things. These are very, very costly. Very often I'll get inquiries from people and they say, contractor, I've asked the contractor to make a change and he's quoting me this. My response is always, is he ripping me off? My response is always this: I can guarantee you he's losing money with that alteration. They try to avoid alterations as much as they can, because these things do delay projects. They do delay. And there's a cost involved. The longer it takes the contractor
costly
to
from a financial point of view, but also from a time point of view.
Absolutely. Well, time is money in construction. The longer the client takes to make their decisions, the more changes the client makes. These costs can never be charged to the client. And the end, I always say this, there's a Portuguese ever saying that both parties walk away unhappy. The client walks away unhappy because they feel like they've paid too much, and the contractor walks away unhappy knowing that he's lost money, and the client is still doesn't appreciate that. But that's the nature of the business.
All right. You know that this is a positive podcast. You've listened for long enough. So why would, with all of these challenges, why would you, you've built houses, a lot of houses in Portugal yourself. I've seen some, they're beautiful. Why would you build a home in Portugal? What are the benefits?
Well, why would you build a home to begin with? Because it's yours. It's a reflection of your personality. The reality is this: when you buy a resale or a house that's a pre-owned house, the reality is the house was designed for someone else. And It doesn't matter how much you try and make small alterations. It will never be your house. You will always come back and think, oh my God, I would have put the kitchen on the other side. I would have done this. I would have not used that color, these kind of things. Whereas the reality is this, is that when you build a home for yourself, it's a reflection of your personality. And the truth is this, I've built many houses. I've also lived in many houses that have been built by other people. A house that you built yourself for yourself, not which you've had built, let me just rephrase that you've had built for yourself. There's just something about it. It just fits much better. It just suits your personality. It's just way, way better. So emotionally, it's a much, much better investment. And then financially as well. You're building something that not only do you love, but generally you're saving money. The profit that the previous person would have made on a resale becomes yours. One day when you decide to sell your home, the profit's yours. I know we don't like others to make a profit, but we certainly love to. So when we sell the house, one of the questions that clients always ask me is, what is the capital gains tax? It's because their intention is to make a lot of money when they sell it, which they deserve to. Yeah.
What about from just a construction perspective? I mean, in terms of the materials used today, the tech, your insulation, these kind of things, this also makes a massive difference, especially with an energy crisis that we've got going on. The longevity of our house, this makes sense as well.
I've got to speak for Portugal because that's where I've had the most experience. As you know, I'm South African. We are not really that conscious of, we live in a country that's essentially quite hot. Not that conscious. It's one of the things that I concern myself when I do go to South Africa. They don't use double glazing. They don't use, there's very little use of any kind of insulation in the properties, this kind of thing. In Portugal, we use a lot. The legislation is set by the European Union. Generally, the laws are set by the Northern European countries because they are the bigger economies. The Portuguese government will take on the European norms, which are normally for colder countries. So our insulation in Portugal is really very well done. We have double glazing. Walls are properly insulated with for those that don't know anything about construction, styrofoam, proper insulation. So the difference between living in a modern home, a recently built home, certainly a home that's been built in the last 10 years, is enormous. In terms of the comfort, the warmth. If you're working with a good company that's aware of that's conscious of where the sun comes from, utilizing natural light, natural heat, these kind of things. I mean, the difference is huge. It's huge, huge, huge.
Okay. Let's go into solutions. Somebody listening, you've convinced them, okay, yeah, I should build a house. It's worth it. Where do they start? Who should they speak to?
Well, building a house in your own country, I'm not sure because I don't know where your listeners are from. I saw the other day 140 something countries. So, and I know
let's assume Portugal. Let's assume Portugal,
yes, exactly.
And let's, for my own bias, assume the Silver Coast. It's the best part of the country.
I'm always going to be biased because in some of these countries they build with wood and board and these kind of things. I'm like, oh my God, exactly. You know the Three Little Pigs story. You don't want to be building with board and wood. Yeah, exactly. But here in Portugal, we build with concrete, we build with bricks and plaster and mortar. So these houses are built to last much longer. I would always only recommend. I often get people will often approach me at exhibitions, international exhibitions, and they'll talk to me about doing restorations and things like this. And I always say to them, listen, I'd rather build you a house a brand spanking new house that looks like a ruin if you want to, but the quality of living inside these houses is going to be much better. But what are the first steps? I would say that you should always look for a reputable developer, a reputable contractor, whatever they refer to him in different countries. In Portugal, we do distinguish between the two things. The developer tends to be the investor, the person who designed the building and then decides to build it. And the contractor tends to be the person who actually builds the house. In the case of key in hand properties, they tend to be one and the same person because they back up the investment that they make. But the first thing that I would do is look for a developer that can offer you a key in hand option. There are recommendations. Most developers that are in this business, there are not a lot of them, especially in the building of houses. There are not a lot of them, but they're well known in the areas that they in the areas that they work. So look for the location that you love the most. I love the Silver Coast. I'd always recommend the Silver Coast. Although I do have a house in the Algarve, which we built a couple of years ago, but location first, and then immediately start looking for the developer that can offer you a key in hand.
What are some of the questions that people should be asking they come across a reputable developer, contractor, whatever the term is? What are some of the things they should be asking? What are the things they should be looking into when they make contact?
I think personally, because you're living in another country, one. Secondly, you're coming to a country, you don't speak the language, you don't understand the laws. You don't understand the building regulations. Every country, Portugal is a European country. It's a first world country, so the regulations are there. Portugal is not a country, and I've got to remind people all the time, Portugal is not a country where you can arrive, build, and then license. No, it's very regulated. So to begin with, I would never recommend that, especially if you want to limit your budget, because especially if you have a budget that you don't want to exceed, I would recommend always that you find a developer who develops in urbanizations that already have infrastructure. Now, when we in Portuguese terms, when we refer to an urbanization, it doesn't mean a city. It's just a licensing term, a language that they use in licensing in Portugal. But what does it mean? It's a place, a plot of land that these services have already been put in place. Roads, telephone, internet, electricity, water, sewage, essential, all of these already in place. And where the developer or the contractor can comfortably know that he can build a house that will fit in the space allowed on that plot of land, and that they will not find any objections in the council. A good idea is always to build less than the council requires, then the less than the maximum set on in terms of the land and within the building boundaries. Yes, we do. We do have building boundaries. In other words, you can't just go and decide to build up against your neighbor's wall. There are specific boundaries. In urbanizations, these things are very clearly defined. There is no vagueness. That's where I would begin.
Okay. And obviously with an urbanization, there's a certain amount of protection as well for the buyer. The land's correctly licensed. It's very clear what can be done. The purpose of the plot is to build. These are all things to safeguard the client's acquisition.
Exactly. It's also likely that if you're dealing with a keen-hand developer, he knows the land. They've already made the inquiries with the council. They are familiar with what they are allowed to build in that place. So it just all goes towards reducing your risk and reducing the variables in construction.
And it all starts with speaking to the right people.
The right people. Listen, I always say this to people. All parties to the transaction, whether it is the buyer or the investor, on the one hand, and the builder or developer on the other hand, all of them want to get to the end in a shorter space of time within the budget that is set. So the interest in everybody in that party is to achieve that, especially in the case of a reputable builder. He doesn't want to be stuck to your house. He wants to build it in the period that you've set out, depending on the size of the construction. He's going to give you some indication of how quickly that can be done. Generally, these terms are included in the contract, or you should be insisting that they are, and they will aim for that. Developers are interested in finishing houses in as short space as possible because for them, time is money. A construction that goes over 3, 4, 5 months they start to lose money, and obviously that's not the intention. And you, again, also want them to build within your budget.
Awesome. Anything to add to that you would, anything else that you'd recommend to people?
I would take the recommendations of the developer. Most developers in this area will already have projects designed for the locations that you're looking at. Why? Because they have already done their homework. They've studied the land. They've had the engineers go in there and check. There's so many things that go. You stand on a plot of land, but you don't know how far they have to go down to hit stone, how much stone there is on the property, all these kind of things. These are variables in construction. They will have done those tests already, so they are more comfortable in quoting you a price that the construction will take, and a period, how soon they can expect to, because the property, especially if the properties are in a urbanization, they know how much time the council normally takes to approve something like this. They have probably had conversations with the planning department to which they presented these projects to get an understanding of what the council would or wouldn't allow. All of the homework has been done before they meet you. That way, result for you is that you're reducing the risk. You're getting the home that you really, really want, that you really, really love, in the period that you want it, which is essential.
Yeah. Okay. I think probably our next episode, we should talk about what is the key in hand process and dig deeper into that. And because a lot of the stuff gets taken care of for you that you don't even have to worry about. It's literally, you're doing all of this from your sofa, and you've got a person that you can trust who's handling a lot of the background stuff, a lot of the licensing things as well.
This will
behind the scenes.
Absolutely. This will vary from developer to developer. I mean, I'm sitting in this interview not knowing who the client is going to be talking to or who the buyer is going to be talking to. But in our group, we take care of all of the process. So our investors are couch investors, effectively, at the end of the day, in the nicest of ways.
Not couch potatoes, couch investors.
Investors.
Big difference.
In other words, what do they want to do? They want to make the decision, and then they want someone to take it over, and then take it all the way to the end. They want to say what they like, what colors they want, what are they expecting out of their project, and once the decision's made, they want someone else to take over. And we do that. We do all the licensing processes. We deal with the councils. We build the house. We deliver the house. We furnish the house if necessary. We do all of the processes. And at the end, the other challenge that you will have with certain developers, with probably in the case most developers, they don't get involved in the licensing at the end. As contractors, they've delivered the house. Their job is done. They move on. And often they will leave it for the owner of the house to go and license it himself. But we take care of the whole process. So it's from one end to the other, with teams of people to accompany the client through the whole process. So I would say that the more reputable the developer, the more services they will offer. Some developers will shy away from this because it is a lot of work. Got to accompany people, take 1,000 telephone calls, lots of emails, all of these kind of things. But this is something that we've been doing for 17 and a half years. We're quite comfortable doing that.
That's why it's Portugal, the simple life.
Exactly.
We make it simple.
Well, that was always the goal. The goal is always to make the experience in dealing with Portugal as close to what we imagined. So if we imagine I'm looking for a country that I can live in, where there's this balance, where things are simple, uncomplicated, this is what we're trying to match in the construction, building a beautiful home with an experience that is much nicer. That's always our objective, is to produce a house in a much better experience than you would have if you were building it in your own town, back in your own country.
Awesome. David, thank you so much. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
And I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to David, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to the simple life.